So my art journaling class's prompt this month is heads and tails. And the tails part is not Tails, it's Tales. So I want them to create a character and then that will tell a tale. So I am starting with a blank background. I have not sealed the page. Probably would have been a good idea to do that just because the paint will move better, but I wanted it to soak in. The paint will absorb into the page and hopefully dry faster, but would have been able to manipulate it a little bit more had I sealed. I'm using the new Pentart wall paint line. You can certainly use it for other things besides walls. I used an eyedropper with a whole lot of water to create a wash so that you can still see the words from the book page coming through. The blue that I'm using is actually a metallic, and it's basically a glaze already. I liked it better when I used it at full strength. I'm simply using a paper towel and a makeup sponge to smear the paint all over the page. Next, I'm using some more of the wall paint line in a yellow with some bubble wrap kind of as a stamp to create some interesting circles in the background. I did add some extra things that I'm not showing in the video because they end up getting covered up. At this point, I want to add my flamingo, figure out my placement, and then I'm going to glue it down. I am using Tight Bond. It's in this little applicator. I would have rather used a brush. I'm trying to make sure that I keep my arrangement, so I'm deciding what I need to really glue down first, holding it in place and gluing some more, just because I want to make sure that I keep that kind of funky placement. Once everything is glued down, then I'm going to start adding some details. And I begin with using a marker and outlining the whole piece. That's all right, but I get to the point where I start embellishing almost too much. Eventually it does become too much. I add a bunch of squiggly lines thinking, all right, I'm trying to get this to not look like it's sitting on the surface and blend into the background. So now I'm going to add a stencil, try to make that happen. Still not exactly doing what I want it to do. So let me add some white squiggly lines and see what happens. Initially, I don't hate the white squiggly lines, but I think I get a little heavy-handed with it. I do really like the little necklace dots though. So I switched to a different pen and start adding some more details. It's getting a little bit better, but the background part's still bothering me. So I decide to go into the background and emphasize some of the circles from the bubble wrap and add some extra mark making, but I'm just not in love with it. So you know what you do when you're not in love with it? You simply paint over it. So I'm using the Wise Owl Chalk Synthesis paint in Isles Avenue, which is my favorite off-white. And I'm going to paint in around my entire critter. I'm using my finger to soften some of the areas and also to wipe away some of the paint that I got on my magazine picture. The slickness of the magazine picture will allow me to wipe some of that off. Probably would have been better if I had had a paper towel or a baby wipe handy, but you know, I don't always have that nearby. The technique that I'm going to teach to my class this month is going to be to do the background in the drippy colors that we did, add their creature or critter, and then we're going to paint in the background just like this. I am doing pretty good coverage everywhere along the outline, but I don't want it to be full coverage. I still want to be able to see some of those words showing through, especially when I get to the end here. I'm really watering down the paint so it becomes a wash in just these other areas that need to be filled in. I don't want it to have the same tone everywhere and be the same intensity of paint. I want there to be some variation and so that you can still see some of the color that was created in the background. And before moving on, I do really need to make sure that this is all dried because I'm going to add some other markers in here and I don't want those to bleed. Now I'm using a Posca paint pen. It is permanent once it's dry, but it can be water activated before then, so you need to be careful if you add more wet layers, just until it's dried. I am going over some of the things that I didn't like originally so that I can cover those up and kind of start over again. The other thing is I'm using the smaller tipped paint pen for this so that my outline is not quite as wide. And I'm going to use the gold gel pen and create some more details. Going over still some of the things that I didn't care for the first time and creating some softer, more subtle lines. The gold is not so much of a contrast that it stands out like the white and the black did previously. So I will switch back and forth between pens. Sometimes I'm going to use the black, sometimes I'll use the gold, and then I'm going to add the white Posca pen as well. I didn't like how dreary the pants got, especially with that stencil over it. I definitely like them a lot better brighter. And I add a little bit to the beak, and I'm going to just keep switching pens and adding a little extra details here and there, intensifying some areas. And here I'm actually using a regular pen. So the tips of these all change sizes and you get different variations in lines. Your mark making is going to vary depending on what you like to create. I get to the point where I end up adding some more details and creating details that weren't there to begin with. And that becomes a whole lot of fun for me. This is when you really make your page your own and you add as much detail or as little as you want. It's going to be totally up to you. I had no idea what the words were going to be for my page, and then it just kind of came to me. I decided to do a walk on the wild side. And I'm not always a fan of my handwriting, so what I did was I emphasized some of the letters and just kept going over them with markers. I end up putting squares around them later with the gold gel pen. Again, I'm continuing to switch between pens and adding a little bit more detail here and there, but I finally add the white polka dots, and that's when I feel like my page is completely coming together. I'm starting to really love her. Early on, I really did not like this page, and I thought it was a big failure, but we got to try and remember that we don't have failures when we're working in our art journal, because it's a place for us to experiment and to try new things. So one of the wonderful new things you can try is when you don't like something, how do you fix it? How can you make it work? Even if it's something that you end up just liking. I ended up loving this page. And at this point, I felt like there was just one more thing that needed help, and that was the background. It was just a little too stark. So since I had used that gold gel pen, and I really liked that it was a subtle detail, I decided to try some gold ink in the background. And I filled in all of that white space. Sometimes I had to turn the stencil a certain way just to get a little bit of the detail in that white area. Using the dauber really helped me to create an intense color in some spots and a really subtle color in others. And I think this was the finishing touch that really brings it all together. I actually ended up creating another page for my class because even though I ended up extremely happy with this page in the end, I had to walk away from it for a little while to love it so much. So don't think that you have failed at something. Sometimes you just need a little distance to appreciate it. So happy creating your heads and tails page too.